I'm being asked to write a client for a legacy production service, and I know nothing about it. But in 30 seconds of work, I'm going to build a client SDK just by watching the app work in production. I got no spec, no code, but I still get service. Let's get started. All right, so let me just start by describing what I'm dealing with. Now, I've got a service that is running in production somewhere. It is written in the very understandable Ruby language. Okay, so I've got that sitting over here. Then it is in production. It's been in production for a long time. I still know nothing about it. There's no documentation, no SDK. Nobody even knows how the clients work with it, but it has some sort of inbound API. So I have a set of clients, API scripts and other things that make use of this API. So this is current state today. Now, I do have the back-end code, but nobody really understands it anymore because everybody's left my company. I know none of you have ever faced this situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert something in this mix here, okay? And many of you will be familiar with it. It's called an MITM proxy. And what that's going to do is it's going to let me intercept some of that traffic going into my service, and it's going to let me do all kinds of fancy things with it, like write a client SDK. And again, this is all going to take about 30 seconds, all right? So that's what this is going to look like. Now, obviously, the data has to go somewhere. So I'm going to do this all locally, although you can record from like a Kubernetes cluster or something else if you want to. But for now, we're just going to do this into local storage. Okay, once all of the data going in and out, all these API requests are recorded and gets dumped into local storage, that is going to let me do something kind of magical. I'm going to be able to run an analysis engine on this that is going to generate a client SDK. So this is a completely non-destructive activity, and it is going to let me walk out of this with a Java SDK based on how the app actually works. So no OpenAPI spec, no Swagger, no nothing. All I'm going to do is observe it, and then we're going to build it from that, and we're going to use a little bit of AI, but that's not that big of a deal here. Okay, we're going to get started with a simple demo Ruby app. I'm assuming I have it pulled down to my local machine, and it's in the Ruby demo directory. I'm going to show you the simplest possible scenario here where we can actually run this directly. But you might be recording from Kubernetes, which is a slightly different workflow. But let's just start with something simple. Now, normally to start this server, the Ruby server, I would just write make server. But I'm going to do it slightly different. I'm going to make use of an open or a free tool called Proximoc. And I'm going to use the record command to instead run the server inside of a little mini sandbox. What this is going to allow us to do is going to let Proximoc pick up on the inbound and outbound connections and record them. So that's all I got to do. I start the server normally. Now, the Ruby app actually runs down here, and it tells us to list on port 8080. But Proximoc is intercepting that. And this is kind of an oddity of how proxies work. We're going to instead tell the client to connect to 4143. So you may have to make a slight change in how you start your client. Now, I'm going to go back to my client directory, same Ruby demo app, and I'm going to go and tell it to talk to that port and run the client. Now, this is just a basic demo app, so it's going to run 10 transactions, fairly straightforward stuff. And oh, lo and behold, I see that the server has received it through the Proximoc filter. Now, what I have here is on the local file system, I now have a Proximoc directory that contains all the recordings that happened during the session. Now, I know everybody loves CLIs now with Claude, but I'm going to go ahead and run Proximoc Web so I can visualize what we recorded. This is not strictly necessary, but I'll just show you around a little bit. Now, Proximoc recorded all those client transactions, and you'll see there's a one-to-one list. If you've ever used Postman before, you'll probably recognize interfaces like this. It's just a bunch of, pretty standard, a look at the request and response for each API call. That's including things like the bodies, all of the headers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you'll also notice that up here at the top, there's the list of all the directories, and since we've only recorded one, this is pretty straightforward. Now, there's lots of features in here, but I am going to focus on creating a client SDK prompt. So I don't like doing a lot of work, so I'm going to have my little AI agent write me my client SDK. I'm going to target Java. You don't strictly need to do this, but it makes the prompt a little bit higher quality. I'm also going to say I'm only interested in my inbound transactions because I'm actually trying to simulate my client and not the back end. And I'm going to say generate prompt. What I get here is for each host, I'm going to get a fairly detailed prompt articulating all of the requests and responses that we've seen, all the different endpoints, the different kinds of shapes of the bodies, and this will allow us to provide a very granular SDK that is hopefully better than what you get from an OpenAPI spec. If you've ever used Swagger or OpenAPI, usually there's a few examples. This is something different. This is an actual recording of the full production data and all the information necessary to reproduce how it works. So you'll see things in here, for instance, like if your content type doesn't actually match your body, which is pretty common, you'll see that kind of stuff articulated in here. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and I'm going to switch over to Cursor because I like Cursor and it works pretty well. Now, I know that Sam told me AI was supposed to take my job and that I don't need to do anything and just sit back, but it turns out that AI is not really that smart, so I'm going to give it a few instructions here. I'm going to say, don't scan the current repository or directory. None of the code is here. Work from a clean slate. I like to be extremely explicit when dealing with AIs. Now all I did from there is I pasted that same information that was in that prompt. I hit go, and now it starts to think. Use wants a Java client library, etc., etc., etc. And it's going to start pushing all that through. Okay. It's creating a Java client library. It's using all the information that we just did. Now, if I give this a few minutes, and I'll probably cut off here in a second, it will generate for me all of, and it didn't even follow my directions exactly, but you'll get a pretty good client SDK anyway. It's going to generate the Maven files and all of the Java instructions necessary to have an instant SDK. So let's review. I started with an app that I don't know much about. I recorded it very quickly, and now I have a client SDK that is at least a reasonable facsimile to get started based on the actual production usage, not what some developer thought or documented earlier. Now, if I let this run for a while, I'll see a bunch of code generated here, and yeah, but I won't make you wait for that. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. Check out proxymock.com or the links below to go and try out the tool yourself, and hope this was helpful.